They say a father's love is quiet, not shown in words, but hidden in sacrifices. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to realize how much he gave, by giving up everything for you. Oliver Gray was born into a poor family in a small town. His father, George, worked as a bus driver. Every morning, he left home before sunrise and returned long after sunset, his uniform covered in dust and sweat. He rarely spoke about his work, but his tired eyes said enough. Oliver's mother, Mary, took care of the house. She often said, "Your father worked so hard for us. One day you'll understand, Ollie." But Oliver was too young to notice. All he knew was that his father never seemed to rest. As a little boy, Oliver often saw his friends getting new shoes, new toys, or colourful backpacks for school. He'd come home with a frown and say, "Dad, can I get new shoes too? Mine are old." His father would smile softly, pat his shoulder and say, "Soon, son, I promise." A few days later, new shoes would appear near his bed. Not the most expensive ones, but good enough. What Oliver never saw was that his father had walked to work for weeks to save the money. As years went by, Oliver grew up watching his father work harder than anyone he knew. George never complained, never asked for anything, and never bought anything for himself. His shirts were always faded, his shoes worn out, his watch cracked, but he never seemed to care. Whenever his wife or son told him to buy something new, he'd just smile and say, "This one still works fine." His favourite saying was, "As long as you both have what you need, I'm happy." And he meant it. When Oliver turned 16, he wanted a guitar. He dreamed of becoming a musician. His parents didn't have the money, but George quietly started working extra shifts at night. He came home even more tired than usual, sometimes too exhausted to eat dinner. A month later, on Oliver's birthday, his father handed him a small box wrapped in newspaper. Inside was a shiny new guitar. Oliver's eyes lit up. "Dad, how did you?" George smiled. "Let's just say your old man got a bonus." But there was no bonus. He had sold his only wristwatch, the one his late father had given him years ago, to buy that guitar. Oliver hugged him, unaware of what that gift had truly cost. Years passed. Oliver went to college and moved to another city to chase his dreams. His father continued working the same job, living the same simple life. Whenever Oliver called, George would ask only one thing: "Are you eating well, son?" He never talked about himself, never complained about his health, his old age, or his loneliness. Oliver's music career slowly took off. He started performing in bars, then on bigger stages. Eventually, he signed with a record label. Money started flowing in. His name appeared on posters, and people began to recognize him on the streets. And somewhere along the way, the phone calls to home became less frequent. One day, his mother called and said, "Your father hasn't been feeling well lately." Oliver frowned. "Tell him to see a doctor, Mum. I'll send some money." She sighed. "He doesn't want money, Ollie. He just wants to hear your voice." "I'll call him later," Oliver said. But later never came. George didn't like to bother his son. Whenever neighbours asked about him, he smiled proudly and said, "He's doing great. I see him on TV sometimes. That's my boy." He kept a small notebook where he wrote down every article, every performance date, and every song his son released. He listened to every interview, even though he didn't fully understand the world his son was now part of. Still, he never stopped being proud. One winter evening, George's health got worse. His wife begged him to rest, but he insisted on going to work. "One more shift won't hurt," he said, forcing a smile. That night, while driving, he felt pain in his chest. He managed to pull the bus to the side before everything went dark. He never made it home. When Oliver got the call, he was in the middle of a concert rehearsal. His manager whispered something into his ear, and suddenly, everything around him stopped. He dropped his guitar, his hands shaking. He took the next flight home. But by the time he reached the hospital, his father was gone. His mother sat quietly beside the bed, holding George's old cracked watch in her hand. Oliver's eyes filled with tears. That watch, he still had it? She looked at him with tired eyes. "No, sweetheart, he sold it years ago. This is the broken one he found later at a flea market. He bought it just to feel close to the one he gave up for you." Oliver fell to his knees and cried. All those years, his father had given up everything, even the smallest comforts, just so his family could live better. And Oliver, blinded by his own success, had never noticed. The funeral was quiet, neighbours gathered, sharing stories about how kind George had been. One of them said, "Your father once gave me his only jacket in the middle of winter. I told him I'd return it, but he said, 'Keep it, your need is greater than mine.'" Oliver's heart broke a little more with every word. After everyone left, he sat alone by his father's grave, staring at the freshly dug earth. "You never bought anything for yourself, did you, Dad?" he whispered. "Not one thing. You gave everything, and I didn't even say thank you." When he returned to the city, everything felt empty. The applause, the fame, the spotlight, none of it mattered anymore. He kept thinking about the man who wore the same shoes for 10 years, who fixed his old shirt instead of buying a new one, and who smiled even when his pockets were empty. A week later, Oliver did something no one expected. He cancelled all his shows and returned home for good. He wanted to live the life his father had dreamed of. Not a rich one, but a meaningful one. He repaired the old house, hung his father's photo on the living room wall, and placed that broken watch right beside it. He spent his days teaching music to kids from poor families, free of cost. When people asked him why, he would smile and say, "Because my father taught me what real wealth means." Years went by. Oliver grew older, and every year on his father's birthday, he would visit his grave with fresh flowers. He'd sit there for hours, talking as if George could still hear him. "I bought new shoes today, Dad," he'd say softly. "And guess what? They reminded me of you, because you never bought any for yourself." Sometimes he'd laugh through his tears, remembering the little things, the smell of his father's lunchbox, the sound of his laughter, the warmth of his rough hands. One day, while visiting the grave, he noticed a little boy standing nearby, crying. The boy said he couldn't afford a new guitar. Oliver smiled, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, and said, "Wait here." He drove back home and returned with his own guitar, the same one his father had once bought for him. "Take it," he said. "Play with your heart. Someone once gave up everything so I could have this. Now it's your turn to pass it on." The boy looked up with wide eyes and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Oliver smiled and said, "Don't thank me. Thank all the fathers who give up everything and never say a word." As he watched the boy walk away, strumming the guitar, Oliver looked up at the sky and whispered, "I hope you're watching, Dad. I finally understand." And somewhere beyond the clouds, perhaps a tired old man smiled, proud, peaceful, and still wearing the same faded shirt he never replaced. Because some fathers don't show their love with words or hugs. They show it in silence, through every sacrifice, every choice, and every moment they put their family's happiness before their own. And if you ever had a father like that, remember, he might have never bought anything for himself, but everything you have came from him.